Kia ora tātou. When I'm introduced to people, Mr. President Hewitt, members and young guests, people almost always, when they hear my name Boshier, they say, "That's an unusual name, is it French?" And then they say, "Haven't I seen you before somewhere?" So let's start with some answers. I don't want to deprive you of a handy icebreaker, though, should that be needed in the future. The name is originally French, but it's been established in Berkshire for centuries, and it originally meant a purveyor of seasoned wood. My ancestors were illiterate servants or farm workers in the 18th century, so the parish vicar spelt the name as it might have sounded. And my great-grandfather took advantage of the Vogel scheme to escape England in 1874 to immigrate here, and he owned sawmills in Dannevirke and Taihape. During the First World War, my grandmother thought the name looked too German, and she had an I inserted in it to make it look more French. So this is a true story. The second question is, have I seen you before? And I have to be more careful in the answer here. One easy answer is, well, maybe you're thinking of my brother, with whom I have some resemblance. Until recently, he was principal family court judge, and possibly the person I was meeting had just appeared before him. But it's not good form to ask, well, have you had a divorce lately? The other possible explanation is, here in Wellington, I was general manager of the Wellington MED. It was a high-profile position because one of my first jobs there was the electricity shortage of 1992. Some of you might remember that well. And it meant that I was interviewed on radio or in the newspaper several times a week for over 2 months. When the MED was converted to the company called Capital Power, Dame Beverley was on the board, as a matter of fact. And we were obliged to remove the cross-subsidy to domestic customers by raising their electricity prices to households. The Evening Post was always on my tail for the reasons why. I'm working at present in a consulting capacity on a number of energy matters, so I wondered if I might bring you up to speed with the latest thinking in the supply of transport fuels, petrol and diesel. I'll leave aside for the moment electric vehicles, which for sure will be a growing segment in New Zealand, especially if the Tiwai aluminium smelter does not renew its contract and wholesale electricity prices fall as a result. All petrol and diesel is imported into New Zealand. If it is desired to improve self-sufficiency, then biofuel is a contender. Until recently, biodiesel was the largest biofuel in New Zealand. The company BioGold was owned by Solid Energy, and biodiesel was made from canola, which is used for cooking. But this depended on government subsidies, and when these ended, Solid Energy was left holding a rather expensive baby. The most promising biofuel in New Zealand at present, therefore, is alcohol made from radiata pine trees. In January this year, Norske Skog closed one of the paper machines at Kawerau due to falling demand for newsprint. This means that the pine forest could be devoted to another use, such as biofuel. The most financially attractive option at present is to produce ethanol using the sugars in the wood, and my analysis is that it is commercially viable. A biorefinery designed by DuPont is immediately available, and the ethanol could be blended up to 10% in petrol. That is legal in New Zealand. Another option is to export the ethanol to America, because the demand there is high and prices are firm. In fact, however, Norske has decided to make synthetic diesel from the pine wood using a high-pressure chemical process developed in Sydney. Now, the greatest financial risks to ethanol production are firstly the end of the mandatory blend of alcohol into petrol in the United States. A political change in America could see the 10% blend made optional there, and ethanol prices would fall as a result. Secondly, fracking is releasing huge quantities of natural gas and oil in the US, and will do so around the world. The theory of peak oil, in fact, could be no longer arguable, and the price of crude oil could, and probably will, 4, I'm very much in favour of fracking in New Zealand and worldwide. I do believe, though, that it must be regulated with a heavy hand. There are some activities, like underground mining and fracking, to which light-handed regulation should not apply. In the case of fracking, unscrupulous operators could release chemicals into waterways. But the benefits to the Western world from fracking are enormous. It defers the day that Europe is dependent on Russia and Iran for its natural gas. So, Mr. President, that is the latest on what will power your cars and trucks for the next 10 years in just 5 minutes.